Hi guys, today I want to continue my discussion on the ancient nuclear war claim in Mohenjo-daro and the Indus Valley Civilization. In my last video, I examined various alleged evidence, such as the radioactive skeletons found on site, the purported fused or vitrified walls and foundations, and the paragraph from the ancient Hindu epic Mahabharata, which speaks of doom in the war that eerily resembles a nuclear destruction. As it turns out, none of this is true. It's all misinformation. I received comments highlighting another piece of information attributed to the ancient nuclear war hypothesis. It came from the renowned American theoretical physicist J. Robert Oppenheimer, who is credited as the father of the atomic bomb. Besides being a brilliant scientist, Mr. Oppenheimer studied Sanskrit and read Bhagavad Gita in its original text in the 1930s. Bhagavad Gita, often referred to as the Gita, is a part of the epic poem Mahabharata, which described a war between two groups of cousins in ancient India. Mahabharata portrayed some supernatural weapons with devastating power that had been suggested to be nuclear bombs. Oppenheimer cited the Gita as one of the books that most shaped his philosophy of life. The physicist had famously said that the atomic bomb reminded him of a quote from the Gita, "Now I am become death, the destroyer of worlds." On top of that, there is a story that someone asked him if the Trinity test was the first nuclear bomb ever. He replied, "In modern times." This implies Oppenheimer thought there was ancient atomic warfare. Some propose that since he read the Gita as a part of the Mahabharata, he must have known these fantastical weapons that resemble nuclear blasts, which could be the reason why he recited the Gita phrase, "I am become death." These are very interesting statements, and the quotes from Oppenheimer, the father of the atomic bomb, add a lot to the credibility of the ancient nuclear war concept. However, I did some digging and found that there is both false information and misinterpretation concerning the Oppenheimer quotes. Additionally, the magical weapons in Mahabharata actually do not resemble nuclear bombs at all. Let's clarify the first modern-time atomic bomb account. Multiple online articles wrote, following the Trinity bomb test in New Mexico, when Oppenheimer was asked if Trinity was the first ever nuclear bomb to be detonated, he replied, "Yes, in modern times." Many believe this alleged quote of Oppenheimer. For such an extraordinary implicit reply, whoever heard it should have a recollection. If this question was asked by an interviewer, a student, or a friend, then who exactly interviewed Oppenheimer? Who asked him this question? Where did this interview take place? And was there anyone else present during the conversation? Did Oppenheimer mention this idea to any other people? Does this story come from a verifiable source? When I searched online, I found no reputable source for this quote. None. No collaborating details are supplied. No other references given. Just random articles repeating the same narrative over and over without any citation. As a result, this cannot be accepted as truth. Extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence, and without a single piece of evidence to back this quote up, is highly likely another deliberate fabrication. The Gita quote, on the other hand, is real. Although Oppenheimer never got religiously involved in it, his brother reported that he was really taken by the charm and general wisdom of the Bhagavad Gita. There is no doubt that the Hindu philosophical ideas resonated with his own, and to a great extent, became his own. Millions of viewers have watched the 1965 footage of Oppenheimer on YouTube, which was filmed 20 years after the nuclear bombing of Hiroshima and Nagasaki. In the clip, Oppenheimer said,
"We knew the world would not be the same. Few people laughed. Few people cried. Most people were silent. I remembered the line from the Hindu scripture, the Bhagavad Gita. Vishnu is trying to persuade the prince that he should do his duty, and to impress him takes on his multi-armed form and says, "Now I am become death, the destroyer of worlds." I suppose we all thought that one way or another.
Here, the quote from the Gita by itself sounds bold and ominous, and almost out of place. Also a bit confusing. Why would God Vishnu say, "I am the destroyer of worlds," in order to persuade the prince to fight his cousins? This has to do with what the Gita is about. Oppenheimer was very familiar with the script, and he knew the context of this sentence. But most people don't. To understand Oppenheimer's quotation better, we need to read it in the context of the Gita. Bhagavad Gita is a portion of the Mahabharata, an epic about a war between two sets of cousins. The Gita begins with Arjuna, the protagonist, a warrior and prince, falling into despondency at the thought of having to kill his own relatives and teachers when the battle lines are drawn. The thought of violence and death the war will cause against his friends and kin distresses him emotionally. Wondering if he should renounce the war, Arjuna seeks the counsel of his friend and charioteer Krishna, an avatar of Lord Vishnu. The conversation between the two constituted the Gita, which centers on this question: should Arjuna fight in a war that will unavoidably lead to heartbreaking loss, or should he withdraw and relinquish his duty as a warrior? Krishna counsels and convinces Arjuna to fulfill his warrior duty for the upholding of his dharma. Please note the Gita is a philosophical classic, as it doesn't include battles or the use of supernatural weapons. The Krishna-Arjuna dialogue covers a broad range of spiritual topics, touching upon moral and ethical dilemmas. The war was a metaphor for the struggle of human life. The Gita synthesizes both rational analysis and religious inspiration in answering the fundamental questions of the meaning of life and death. Oppenheimer himself called the Gita the most beautiful philosophical song existing in any known tongue. The "am death and destroyer" sentence Oppenheimer cited came later in the book in chapter 11. Before that, similar phrases have been said multiple times by Krishna/Vishnu. In chapter 9, Krishna says, "I am immortality as well as death. I am also both the absolute and the temporal." In chapter 10, Krishna states, "I am the beginning, the middle, and the end of all creation. I am the all-devouring death and also the origin of future beings." So, we can see that Prince Arjuna already knew that Krishna, aka God Vishnu, is both life and death. In chapter 11, Arjuna asked to see Krishna in his real form. Then he saw the universal form of the Lord with many mouths and eyes, and many marvelous visions with numerous divine ornaments, holding many divine weapons, wearing divine garlands and apparel, anointed with celestial perfumes and ointments, full of all wonders, the limitless God with faces on all sides. If the splendor of thousands of suns were to blaze forth all at once in the sky, even that wouldn't resemble the splendor of that exalted being. Remember that falsified Mahabharata quotation: a single projectile, charged with all the power of the universe, an incandescent column of smoke and flame, as bright as the thousand suns. Many thought this to be a description of a nuclear war that happened in ancient India. Words were selectively picked from the original writing to make it seem more legit, though this paragraph does not exist in the ancient epic. By reading the Gita, we know that the thousand suns analogy is used to depict the divine and glorious cosmic form of Vishnu instead of a weapon. After Arjuna sees the magnificence of the god's supreme spirit, he is initially awestruck, hair on end, in ecstasy. Then he became terrified. He sees the god's infinite form with many mouths, eyes, arms, thighs, feet, stomachs, and many fearful tusks. He sees warriors, all kings and all creatures are entering the god's blazing mouths from all sides, rush to their destruction like moths into a flame. Frightened Arjuna asked this terrible form, "Who are you?" It's in response to this question that Krishna replies with the "I am become death" quote. Krishna's words immediately following the destroyer of all verse make this clear. Here is one of the translated versions after the prince asked, "Who are you?" "I am death, the mighty destroyer of the world. I've come here to destroy all these people. Even without your participation in the war, all the warriors standing arrayed in the opposing armies shall cease to exist. Therefore, get up and attain glory. Conquer your enemies and enjoy a prosperous kingdom. All these warriors have already been destroyed by me. You are mere my instrument. Kill all these great warriors who are already killed by me. Do not fear. You will certainly conquer the enemies in the battle. Therefore, fight." The prince was eventually persuaded, and the war finally began. So, why did Oppenheimer cite the "I'm the destroyer" quote? Was it as literal as it sounds, or is there more to it? If it's just literal meanings, was it necessary for the physicist to mention that this phrase not only came from the Gita, but also when Vishnu was trying to persuade the prince to fight? The nuclear bomb is for sure death and destroyer. But now we realize that the Gita is saying that all the people who die in war were already slain by the god, that the warrior was only an instrument. The destruction was decided by Vishnu, and Arjuna solely followed his dharma or duty as a warrior. Did Oppenheimer in some way regard his role in the creation of the atomic bomb as his destined duty, like Arjuna in the war? Did he find solace in this aspect of the Gita's teachings, that regardless of his participation, the nuclear bomb was inevitable? As Oppenheimer would later state, quote, "I did my job, which is the job I was supposed to do," end quote. Historian James Hagia summarized as follows: "It was the duty of the scientist to build the bomb, but it was the duty of the statesman to decide how to use it." Oppenheimer clearly and repeatedly acknowledged these very different dharmas. Despite separating his own dharma or duty from that of government leaders, the scientist's consequential decision deeply tormented him. Throughout the last decades of Oppenheimer's life, he maintained parallel expressions of pride at the technical achievement of the bomb and a profound guilt at its devastation. According to Hagia, Oppenheimer stated more than once that the bomb had simply been inevitable, which is true, because the war will continue whether he took part in it or not. As it had been for Arjuna, the Manhattan Project would go on even without his involvement. There would be loss of life with or without him. In Oppenheimer's mind, probably, creating the atomic bomb was his dharma. Like it or not, he could not run away from it. Back to the footage with the destroyer quote of the Gita. To me, it not only represents the deadly bomb, but also hinted at the inevitability of it and the great dilemma the scientist faced. It doesn't in any way indicate that Oppenheimer thought there was nuclear war in ancient times. Viewed in its context, the "I'm become death" quote possibly reveals how Oppenheimer used the philosophy to ease the pain of his conscience. Next, what about the supernatural weapons in the rest of the Mahabharata? Some of them paint an uncanny picture of bombs, such as the most powerful Brahmastra and Brahmasisha Astra. They caused, quote, terrible flames within a huge sphere of fire. Numerous peals of thunder were heard. Thousands of meteors fell, and all living creatures became inspired with great dread. The entire Vulcan seemed to be filled with noise and assumed a terrible aspects of those flames of fire. The whole earth, with her mountains and waters and trees, trembled. End quote. If you are only given this part to read, then it does somewhat resemble a nuclear bomb. But again, once we put this into context, it becomes very clear that these special weapons were not bombs at all. Listen to this part on using the Brahmastra weapon. The descendant of Kakasta, taking out of his quiver an excellent arrow furnished with handsome wings and golden feathers and bright and beautiful head, fixed it on the bow with the Brahmastra mantra. Were this, Savyasasi of the immeasurable soul bowed unto Brahman and invoke into existence that excellent irresistible weapon called a Brahmastra, which could be applied by the mind alone. And this, with proper mantras, Arjuna then fixed the Brahmastra on his string and shrouding all the points of the compass with arrows. Quiver, arrow, string. It appears that the Brahmastra are beautiful arrows stored in quivers to be used with Brahmastra mantra. As for Brahmastra Astra, the weapon said to be capable of consuming the whole world, here is how it can be used. Quote, he inspired that blade of grass with proper mantras and converted it into that powerful celestial weapon. He uttered in wrath these terrible words for the destruction of the Pandavas. A fire then was born in that blade of grass, which seemed capable of consuming the three worlds like the all-destroying Yama at the end of the Yuga. Can a nuclear bomb be summoned through mantras and released through a blade of grass? I don't think so. Moreover, the scary weapon was then neutralized by Arjuna's celestial weapon, which can neutralize all weapons. Arjuna did so by taking his bow with its shaft fixed on the string, then wishing good unto the preceptor's sons and then unto himself and unto all his brothers. By doing this, the immense Brahmastra Astra was neutralized. Do these portrayals match how nuclear bombs detonate? No. Can a nuclear bomb, which already exploded, be neutralized by shooting something else at it? Not as far as we know. Hence, these remarkable weapons in the Hindu epic are not like modern atomic bombs. Whoever claimed so probably either didn't read the above said paragraphs or read them very selectively. Some may argue that these celestial weapons in Mahabharata were using arrows, bows, strings, and quivers to represent high-tech nuclear bombs that people back then cannot comprehend. I beg to differ. These are very explicit, unmistakable depictions of using bows and arrows, even a blade of grass, to shoot the most powerful weapons that are supposedly capable of destroying worlds. The sublime poem used artistic exaggeration to paint a sensational and alluring story. If we interpret the Hindu bows and arrows in the epic as nuclear bombs, then what about the bows and arrows and other supernatural weapons from ancient writings of Mesopotamia, Greece, Persia, and other countries? Are we going to consider all the magical weapons in these old texts as being nuclear bombs or modern missiles? These epics and folklores might not all be fables, but is it appropriate for us to take such a huge leap? So, in summary, the mystical weapons in the Hindu Mahabharata do not illustrate nuclear bombs or ancient nuclear warfare. The alleged quote from Oppenheimer that the Trinity bomb test being the first in modern times is almost certainly a fabrication. Oppenheimer's real citation of the Gita, I am become death, the destroyer of worlds, might in some way imply the inevitability of the developing and dropping of nuclear bombs, the death and destruction they caused, and the unbearable burden the scientists carried. Since the Gita does not contain descriptions of supernatural weapons, it's possible that Oppenheimer wasn't referencing it as such and thus never thought of these ancient weapons after seeing the Trinity test. From a dharmic viewpoint, the creation of atomic bombs was Oppenheimer's dharma or duty, just like how Prince Arjuna must fight in his war. No matter how painful and haunting the consequences are of one's actions, an individual must perform his or her duty, since this is the will of God, and certain events are bound if not destined to happen with or without our participation. What do you think? If you have any insights, please leave me a comment. If you like my video, please subscribe to my channel and share with others. You can also support me on Patreon, which is a monthly charge, or on Buy Me a Coffee. I appreciate your support. This is Curious Being. I'm Tina. Thanks for watching and see you next time.